Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Cynthia Gonzalez, and I am one of the 4 members on my team alongside Adam Coulon, Stephen Fields, and Karthik G. And our project will investigate pharmaceutical spending on healthcare providers and other medical professionals.
For this project, we pulled data from the CMS Open Payments dataset for the fiscal year 2020. The dataset provides visibility into financial transactions made by pharma biotech companies to doctors and physicians. It includes over 78 million transactions, which make up $60 billion in revenue since 2014. For nature of payments, there are 3 main categories of payments to physicians that we see in this dataset. The first being general payments, which includes things like travel and lodging, research-focused payments for incentivizing drug and device research, and investments made by pharma companies in the form of stocks, bonds, and loans.
We had a couple motivations, which are listed here, but the biggest motivation was to provide visibility into the spending patterns found in this dataset. Our goals were to look into the spending of pharma and medical device companies spending into physician specialty areas, and to look into the top areas of research spending.
We took an SDLC approach for this project. We had a total of 6 phases, and we spent approximately 1.5 weeks for each phase. After considering 4 options, we shortlisted on CMS Open Payments data to be the main focus of this project. We implemented this in Python using Google Colab.
These are Lilly Pharmaceuticals' existing visualizations. Open Payments created these visualizations for both hospitals and physicians and describes them uniquely rather than comparatively. These are a brief summary of the different visualizations and methods our presentation will cover. We were able to achieve these using a combination of Botley, Pandas, NumPy, Matplotlib, among other packages we learned about throughout the semester. As mentioned earlier, one of our goals was to explore spending among pharmaceuticals, medical device companies, and biotech companies, and this figure was our first attempt to do this. After cleaning the data to collect unique companies, we ended up with over 1,500, and this presented a crowding issue shown in this figure since the number of companies quickly overwhelmed the bar graph. A second issue was that the data barely fit on one page since some of the data reached the millions, while some was as little as no dollars. So the only way we could fit the bars in one graph was to apply log to the data. Because it was not readable, we chose to use a subset. So instead of trying to work with 1,500 columns, we decided to visualize the top 10 and bottom 10 competitors. As you can see on the left, Genentech, which is a biotech company, led 2020 with a payment sum of over 200 million. Medtronic Vascular came in second, but still paid less than half of the incentives Genentech did. On the other hand, the bottom 10 did not make any payments above $50. One thing that was interesting about these results is that of the 1,500 unique companies, only 2 of them didn't make any type of payment. Also, you can see that Teleflex is Canadian, so a reason that the list of unique companies is so long is because it includes some international locations. Another objective of ours was to visualize spending on specialties and to see which specialties attracted the most incentives. We had a similar issue with this graph since there were 271 unique specialties, so not as many as 1,500, but still overwhelming. In the graph, you can see that the specialties and their corresponding columns are more readable, but we also decided to proceed with a subset here. So once again, we zoomed in on the data and focused on the top 10 specialties receiving payments. As you can see, there are several subspecialties that belong to one general category. Here, all of the subspecialties belong to allopathic and osteopathic departments. There are other departments that we will see in the next slide, but this department received the majority of money from pharmaceuticals, which makes sense because almost every hospital and research service is done by a specialty that belongs to this department. For example, another department is chiropractic services, and although they perform patient services, rarely do they engage in as much research, which is a big part of the payments. This graph is a summary of the bottom 10 specialties, and now you begin to see other broad departments, including eye and vision, which makes it on here a couple of times. Podiatric medicine also made it in the bottom 10. In this data set, every specialty received some kind of payment, the least being less than $40. And in a couple of slides, we will analyze the subspecialties in more detail. This is just a quick box plot summary of the specialty data we just looked at. You can see that the bottom 10 is much less skewed than the top 10, which is more evenly distributed. You can also see that the top 10 had a major outlier, which is Genentech, the biotech, which led the way in payments in an earlier figure.
This pie chart gives spend analysis by specialty areas. Out of the different specialties, we observed that allopathic and orthopedic physicians had the maximum share of about 85% of the overall spend for 2020. Further drilling down into into subspecialties, we analyzed this data across 4 states having the maximum spend. Across years, neurological surgery, radiology, and orthopedic surgery had the maximum spend at a subspecialty level. And this chart gives a spend perspective at a monthly level. May seems to be the month where the average spend is highest, and this is across the 4 states where having the maximum spend. And at a subspecialty level, there is an interesting observation. While radiology and neurology have had higher spend in 2020 compared to the earlier years, other subspecialties have had very lukewarm spending, and we can only attribute this pattern to COVID setting in 2020. We wanted to analyze the payment flow across states, and this heat map shows the trend across manufacturer's state and the state of the doctors who received payment. State of New Jersey and Minnesota, we see are the major contributors, and this is probably due to these 2 states having a lot of pharma companies operating out of.
For this chart, we're seeing a breakdown of total payments received by physicians for each region. The West and South regions have the highest payments received at over $600 million. Next, we look further into each region to see the breakdown on states within the region. For the Northeast region, we have Massachusetts having the most payments received, followed by New York and Pennsylvania. And for the West region, we have California having the largest number of payments received, followed by Colorado, Washington, and Arizona. The South region, where Florida and Texas have by far the most payments received at over 100 million. And lastly, Midwest region, we see Illinois, Michigan, and Ohio as having the largest payments received. Now to look at breakdown of how each state ranks for the highest receiving states and the lowest receiving states. In this chart, we see the top 10 highest states. This includes California, Massachusetts, Florida, and New York. It's worth noting California has received over 2 times the total US dollars compared to the second highest earning state in Massachusetts. Next, to look at the lowest earning states, we have Alaska, which is the lowest, followed by Vermont and Montana. This then provides some insight into which states pharma companies are putting money into.
For our next few slides, we present a few different choropleths. First, we have a view of the number of records that occur in the data set on a per state basis. Here we can see that a large amount of the data comes from the states California, Texas, and Florida. As a reference, the entire data set is around 6.8 million rows, of which California accounts for just over 608,000. I'd also like to take a quick note of Minnesota and Massachusetts, as they both have relatively low count of records. But as we can see in this choropleth of the average spent per record, Massachusetts and Minnesota have the highest average, with Massachusetts having over $2,100 on average and Minnesota having nearly $1,500. So while they have few records, the records they have are often large sums of money. Others worth noting are Vermont and Colorado with nearly $1,000 spent on average, and California and Washington with around $750. For the final choropleth, we have the total spent per state. With California's high count of records and relatively high spending per record, it comes as no surprise that they are the highest total spending with over $400 million. Massachusetts came in second with spending of $162 million, and then Florida, Texas, and New York all have over $100 million. For our last visualization, We made a word cloud over the names of studies on the CMS research payments dataset for 2020. Word clouds aren't always the best visualizations in terms of usefulness, but this is a concise way to see some of the commonalities between the studies and the dataset. As for our insights, our biggest insights are that California gets the largest amounts of investments, which doesn't come as a huge surprise considering their population. More impressive is that their payments are more than 800 times larger than the state with the smallest total physician payments.
This project, we believe, has great expansion possibilities. By adding better visualizations and then visually making data available to public will make it easier for public to consume this data, which in turn will increase the trust they have on the medical ecosystem. Then visibility to research data will bring in better hope and trust for patients who are suffering from ailments and who are awaiting research breakthroughs for the treatment. And this data will also provide visibility to the public about the different affiliations that the doctors have to pharma companies. And there is a lot of scope towards extending the data sets that that payments today offers, where pharmacy sales data, drug pricing, and providers spend data can also be potentially included as open payments data sets. Thank you so much for this opportunity.